Raymond Walker woke up at exactly 5:30 a.m., like he did every morning since he left the Marine Corps 15 years ago. The habit was ingrained. Something war had carved into him. And not even retirement in sleepy Havenbrook, North Carolina, could erase it. He reached over, half awake, to the other side of the bed. It was already empty. The faint smell of coffee wafted from downstairs, mixed with a hint of lavender, Claire's perfume. She always put on perfume in the morning, even when there was nowhere to go. A lady should smell like she cares, she used to say with a grin. Ray smiled faintly. After 3 decades of marriage, she still made him breakfast every single morning. Eggs, coffee, and that smile that somehow made even the hardest mornings lighter. He pulled on a flannel robe, rubbed the stiffness out of his knees, and headed down the creaky hardwood stairs of their 2-story farmhouse on Sycamore Lane. The place was old but charming, just like Claire. She'd restored every inch of it herself, or at least supervised it like a general in a war zone. Their neighbors often called it the prettiest damn house in Havenbrook. "Morning, soldier," Claire greeted him from behind the kitchen island, flipping a pancake. Her blonde hair was tied up in a silk scarf. Even in her 50s, she looked effortlessly elegant, the kind of woman who seemed born in the wrong era, meant for ballrooms instead of backyards. "Morning, sweetheart." Ray walked over and kissed her cheek, his hand resting on her lower back for just a moment too long. "You're up early." "Fundraiser prep," she said with a yawn. "I've got to drive over to the community center later and check on the flower arrangements. You remember we're hosting the mayor's wife tonight, right? Do I ever forget something that important?" Ray smirked. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Okay, don't answer that." They ate breakfast on the back porch like they always did, steaming coffee in mismatched mugs, pancakes with butter and syrup, and the sound of morning birds filling the space between them. From their spot, the whole yard stretched out like a picture, azaleas in full bloom, a white fence Claire insisted on painting every spring, and a flagpole where Ray still raised the American flag every morning at 6. "Martin asked about you again," Claire said, pouring more coffee. "Says you owe him a fishing trip." "Martin's just trying to get out of going with his wife to yoga class," Ray chuckled. "But maybe I'll call him." Claire smiled, but Ray noticed something, a flicker in her eyes, almost like hesitation. He dismissed it. She probably hadn't slept well. They were both getting older, and not every day felt like spring anymore. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence only 2 people deeply familiar with each other could enjoy. Then Claire spoke, her voice softer. "You ever think about how lucky we are?" Ray glanced over, caught off guard. "Every damn day." "I mean it," she said. 30 years, and not a day I've doubted this." Ray reached out and took her hand. "Me neither." But as he looked in her eyes, for just a second, a very brief second, he saw something else. A shadow. It passed quickly, so quickly that he might have imagined it. Claire got up and took their plates inside. Ray leaned back in his chair, listening to the breeze rustle the trees along Sycamore Lane. He didn't know it yet, but this was the last quiet morning they'd ever have. 3 days later, something shifted. It was subtle at first. Claire had always been the composed one, the type who remembered birthdays, wrote thank you notes by hand, and never forgot to return a borrowed casserole dish. But that morning, Ray found her keys in the refrigerator and her phone in the laundry basket. "You okay?" he asked casually, leaning against the doorframe. Claire laughed, brushing a hand through her hair. "I guess I've got too many tabs open in my brain today." "You never forget things," Ray said, half teasing but fully curious. Claire gave a tight smile. "Even legends slip sometimes, Sergeant." He let it go, but the tension didn't. That afternoon, she left without telling him. When he got back from the hardware store, her car was gone and a yellow Post-it note sat on the counter. "Running to Denver for a last-minute supply pickup. Be back before dinner. Love you." Denver was almost 2 hours away. A strange trip for someone who usually called him even if she was 5 minutes late to lunch. He called her cell, straight to voicemail. Ray felt a knot in his chest, a knot that hadn't tightened like this since the battlefield. He told himself it was nothing. Claire had always been independent. She probably needed flower arrangements for the fundraiser or new linens for the community center gala. Still, she hadn't mentioned a trip that morning, and she always mentioned everything. When Claire returned later that evening, she looked different. Not physically, but emotionally. She was quieter, moving slower, as if her brain was elsewhere. Ray studied her face. Her smile was there, but it was the kind you practiced in front of a mirror. "You get everything you needed?" he asked. "Yeah," she said quickly, brushing past him toward the kitchen. "Store almost let me down, but I pulled it together." He waited. She didn't offer any more detail. "You could have called. I would have gone. It was spontaneous. I didn't want to bother you." The conversation died right there. Claire busied herself reheating leftovers while Ray sat at the table, jaw clenched, mind spinning. The next evening, Ray woke up around 1:30 a.m. and noticed the bed beside him was empty again. He walked quietly down the stairs, careful not to creak the floorboards. From the living room, he heard a voice, Claire's, low and urgent. She was on the phone. "No, not yet. I'm still waiting on the final word." "Yes, I know what it means if." The moment Ray's foot hit the bottom step, Claire ended the call. She turned quickly, startled. "Ray," she said, placing the phone down, "you scared me." "Couldn't sleep," he replied. "Who were you talking to?" "No one. Just a client. Design consult for the Johnsons." At 1:30 in the morning? Claire hesitated. Different time zones. She's in Paris. Ray didn't say anything, but her hands were shaking slightly as she poured herself a glass of water. The next morning, Martin stopped by. He dropped off a six-pack and leaned on the porch rail beside Ray. "How's the Queen of Havenbrook?" Martin asked, nodding toward the house. "Busy. Distracted lately." Martin narrowed his eyes. "Everything all right?" Ray gave a small shrug. "I don't know, man. Something's off. She went to Denver out of the blue. Got some weird phone calls. I asked her. She brushed me off. Think she's hiding something?" "I think she's scared of something," Ray said quietly. "But I don't know what." Martin paused, opened a can, took a sip. "Well, if something doesn't feel right, maybe it ain't." Ray nodded, but he kept his thoughts to himself. That evening, he got his answer, or at least part of it. Claire was in the shower when the landline rang. "Walker Residence," Ray said, picking up. There was a pause on the other end. Then a man's voice. "Claire, it's me. I got the results. We need to talk. Time's running out." Ray's blood turned cold. "This is her husband," he said slowly. "Who is this?" The caller stammered. "Sorry, wrong number." Then hung up. Ray stood there in the kitchen, staring at the receiver in his hand. A low hum filled his ears, the kind that came before gunfire. When Claire came downstairs wrapped in a towel, he confronted her. "Some guy just called," Ray said he had the results. Sounded urgent. Claire froze for a split second, just long enough to confirm something. Then her face smoothed out. "Debt collector," she said too quickly. "They keep calling from different numbers. He asked for you by name." Claire looked away. "I'll call," and straightened out. Ray watched her walk away, his chest burning. He'd been married to this woman for 30 years. He thought he knew her inside and out. But now he wasn't so sure who she really was. Saturday morning came with cloud cover and the smell of rain in the air. Ray stood in the kitchen, sipping black coffee and staring out the window as Claire hummed softly upstairs. She seemed lighter this morning, almost cheerful. Ray, on the other hand, hadn't slept. His mind kept circling back to the phone call. Time's running out. And the man's name? He hadn't said it, but something about his voice lingered, familiar but not placeable. Later that day, they went to a barbecue at Martin's house. Claire wore a pale blue dress and wide-brimmed straw hat. No one would have guessed the storm brewing under the surface. Susan, Martin's wife, pulled Claire aside to talk about a fundraiser. Meanwhile, Martin grilled steaks and nudged Ray with a bottle of beer. "You still brooding?" Martin asked, glancing at Claire in the garden. "I haven't stopped since Wednesday," Ray replied. "You think she's having an affair?" No, Ray shook his head. "This is something else." Martin's face turned serious. "You want to talk to her?" "Nah," Ray muttered. "I'm not there yet. But something's going on, and I don't like being kept in the dark." As if on cue, Claire's phone vibrated on the patio table. She saw it, flinched, then picked it up and stepped into the garden. Ray watched her go. 5 minutes later, she returned pale as a ghost. "You all right?" he asked, standing up. "Client stuff," she replied quickly. "I may need to go back to Denver next week." Ray nodded, but his eyes narrowed. Martin noticed the exchange, too. That night, back at home, Claire claimed a headache and went straight to bed. Ray stayed downstairs, restless, pacing like a guard dog. Then he saw it, Claire's phone charging on the nightstand. She never put a passcode on it. She believed they had nothing to hide. Except tonight, there was one unread message on the lock screen. Logan, results confirmed. Time is short. We need to act fast. Ray's heart sank. He placed the phone down without opening it and stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the sound of his wife breathing beside him. Logan. That was the name. By Monday, Ray had done what he swore he never would. He dug into Claire's personal browser history. Search terms filled the screen. Kidney donation risks. Sibling donor compatibility. Private transplant clinics in Denver. Then he saw it. Can identical twins be different sexes? His breath caught. That made no sense. Identical twins couldn't be different sexes, right? Claire left for Denver Wednesday morning with a small suitcase and a goodbye kiss that lingered just a little too long. I'll call you once I'm checked in, she promised. Don't worry. But Ray didn't wait. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, he grabbed his keys and headed straight for Denver. Not in his patrol vehicle, in his personal Ford sedan. Civilian clothes. His holster at his hip, a habit that had become muscle memory even off duty. At Denver Medical Transplant Center, the receptionist typed quickly, then frowned. I'm sorry, she said. There's no Claire Walker scheduled today in nephrology. Ray stiffened. She said she had a kidney procedure scheduled. Are you sure it's the right clinic? He stepped aside, heart racing, and called every major hospital in Denver. Nothing. On a hunch, he returned to the front desk. Can you check if someone named Logan Ward was admitted today? She typed again. Yes. 5th floor. Transplant wing. Room 512. Ray nodded once and walked toward the elevator, his gut twisting like it hadn't since his days in Fallujah. Room 512 was quiet. Inside, a thin man with sandy blonde hair sat up in bed, flipping through a brochure. He looked to be about Claire's age. Logan Ward? Ray asked, stepping inside. The man looked up, surprised. Yes. I'm Ray Walker, Claire's husband. The color drained from Logan's face. I didn't know she told you. She didn't, Ray said coldly. She told me she was here for her own treatment. There was silence. She lied to me. So tell me, Mr. Ward, what the hell is going on? Logan exhaled slowly. It's not easy to explain. Try me. Logan looked out the window. I have end-stage kidney failure. I don't have much time. Claire is the only compatible donor. A perfect match. Ray's eyes narrowed. You two aren't even related. She told me you were a long-lost brother. We're more than that, Logan said softly. We're identical twins. Ray took a slow step back. What did you say? Claire and I were born male. Both of us. Identical twins, Colin and Logan Ward. Ray's breath stopped. Logan continued. Claire transitioned before she ever met you. She didn't lie. She just didn't tell you who she was before. The room began to spin. 30 years, Ray whispered. 30 years she's kept this from me. She loves you, Logan said. She's terrified of losing you. She never meant to hurt you. Ray turned and left without another word. In the hallway, his knees nearly buckled. 30 years. His entire life. His marriage. Everything built on something he didn't understand anymore. And deep down, the part that scared him the most was that he still loved her. Ray sat in a motel parking lot for almost an hour before he could bring himself to start the car. The file from the hospital lay open on the passenger seat. Claire's medical history, gender reassignment documentation, legal name change. Cold, clinical proof that the life he had known hadn't been what he thought. He stared at the photo tucked in his wallet. Their wedding day, 30 years ago. Claire's smile, so bright it could light a room. The way she leaned into him, full of ease, full of trust. Ray pulled out the old wooden box Claire had gifted him on their 5th anniversary. Inside were mementos. A pressed lily from their honeymoon in Asheville, a hotel key card from Santa Fe, a tiny ticket stub from the first movie they ever saw together, Legends of the Fall. He turned it over and noticed her handwriting. You cried more than I did. He let out a bitter chuckle, then suddenly slammed the box shut. He couldn't breathe. Everything had been real. Every moment, every laugh, every fight, every night they lay tangled in bed. But she had kept this from him. This. His hand shook. Was it betrayal or survival? He walked to the closet and opened her side. Her perfume lingered faintly on the hanging dresses. In the back, wrapped in plastic, was her wedding gown. Ivory, lace, carefully preserved. He reached out and ran his calloused fingers across it, and before he realized it, he was crying, sobbing silently into folds of fabric that still smelled like lavender and June. This wasn't just about secrets. It was about his identity too, his manhood, his marriage, the story he thought he was living. And now, it was like reading the same book again, but discovering entire chapters had been torn out. The drive back from Denver was a blur. The highway stretched endlessly under a gray sky, and Ray's mind was louder than the wind outside his window. His hands gripped the steering wheel like a man clinging to a lifeline. Claire, or Colin. No, Claire. That's who she was to him for 30 years. But now everything felt like a cruel illusion. The woman he made breakfast for. The woman who held him through nightmares. The woman he grew old beside. She was real, wasn't she? And yet, a single truth had unraveled everything he thought he knew. When Ray pulled into the driveway on Sycamore Lane, the sun was setting, casting long orange streaks across the lawn. Claire's car was already there. She was home. He sat in the car for a moment, his heart hammering like war drums in his chest. His service pistol lay holstered beneath his jacket. He hadn't meant to bring it. It was just instinct. But now, its presence felt heavier than ever. Ray stepped out and walked toward the front door like a man approaching a bomb. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of candles and Claire's lavender perfume. She sat on the couch, reading a book. When she looked up and saw him, her face went pale. "Ray," she said, standing slowly. "You're home early." He closed the door behind him. Locked it. "I went to Denver," he said. Claire's eyes widened slightly. "I went to the hospital. Room 512. I met Logan." Silence. "Tell me the truth," Ray demanded. "All of it." Claire took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "Yes," she said softly. "Logan and I, we were born male. Identical twins. My name was Colin. But even back then, I knew I wasn't meant to be him. I knew who I was." Ray stared at her hollow-eyed. "You lied to me," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I never lied," she replied gently. "I just didn't tell you. I couldn't. I was afraid you'd leave me." And then time passed. The lie got heavier. But everything else, everything was real. My love for you. Our life. That was never fake. He stepped closer, his voice tightening. 30 years, Claire. 30 years I thought I knew you. I'm still me, she said, tears forming in her eyes. The woman you married. The woman who stood by you. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed, he snapped. His hand brushed against his jacket. The gun was there, cold and present. Claire noticed the movement. Her eyes flicked to his hip. "Ray," she said softly. "Don't do this." He pulled the gun out slowly, but didn't raise it. "I don't know who you are," he said. "I'm the same person who held your hand through your father's funeral," Claire said, voice cracking. "Who stayed up nights when your nightmares came? Who built this life with you?" Ray's hand trembled. "But you weren't honest." "No," she admitted. "I wasn't. And I'm sorry. But please just talk to me. We can face this together." Ray opened his mouth to speak, but a sudden boom shattered the silence. A firecracker outside, thrown by neighborhood kids, echoed just beneath the living room window. Instinct took over. Ray flinched. His finger jerked. The gun fired. The sound thundered through the house. Claire gasped. One short, breathless sound, and collapsed. A red stain bloomed across her blouse, growing fast. Ray dropped the gun. "No, no." He rushed to her, cradling her in his arms. "Claire, Claire, stay with me. Please," his voice cracked, panic rising. "I didn't mean to. Oh God, I didn't mean to." Her lips moved. He leaned in. "I love you," she whispered, barely audible, before her eyes rolled back. "No, no, no, no." He fumbled for his phone with shaking fingers and dialed 911. "My wife," he choked out. "Please, she's been shot. I need help. I didn't mean to. Please hurry." Blood soaked the floor beneath them. The scent of gunpowder and lavender mingled in the air. He held her tighter, feeling her body go limp in his arms. Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. But inside the Walker home, time had stopped. The red and blue lights cut through the dark like daggers. Ray knelt on the living room floor, arms wrapped around Claire's lifeless body, his hands sticky with her blood. His face was hollow, empty, like someone who had fallen out of time. The front door burst open. "Hands where I can't see them," someone shouted. Ray didn't move. He just kept rocking back and forth, whispering to the woman in his arms. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean it." Two officers rushed in, weapons drawn. One of them, Officer Jenna Price, recognized him instantly. "Chief Walker." Ray turned slowly, eyes glazed. "I shot her," he said quietly. "It was an accident." She holstered her gun and stepped forward. "We need EMS now," she shouted to the radio on her shoulder. Another officer moved to Ray, handcuffed him gently, as if the weight of what had just happened didn't need force. Ray didn't resist. He barely noticed. They pulled him to his feet. The front of his shirt was soaked with blood. His eyes never left Claire's body as paramedics rushed in and began CPR, even though everyone in the room already knew it was too late. At the station, Detective Lorraine Blake was called in. A veteran homicide investigator with a reputation for reading people like books, she walked into the interview room where Ray sat, still in the same blood-stained clothes, still silent. "Mr. Walker," she said, taking a seat across from him. "I need to ask you a few questions." Ray looked up at her. "She's dead." "I know," Blake said softly. "I'm sorry. Can you tell me what happened?" Ray stared at the table for a long time. Then finally, in a low voice, "She told me the truth. About who she used to be. About Logan." Blake nodded. "And that made you angry?" Ray shook his head. "I was confused. Hurt. 30 years of my life. I thought I knew everything. Then I found out. I didn't know anything at all." "Did she threaten you?" "No." "Did she try to hurt you?" "No." Ray repeated. Blake leaned forward. "Then why was your gun drawn?" Ray blinked, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I didn't even realize I'd taken it out. We were arguing. I felt lost." And then his voice cracked. Then there was this loud bang outside. A firecracker. "It just my finger." He covered his face with both hands. "I didn't mean to shoot her. I didn't." Blake remained silent for a moment, then opened the folder in front of her. "Based on your statement, the coroner's report, and the trajectory of the bullet, we believe it was accidental. But Mr. Walker, you pulled a loaded firearm on your wife. That's manslaughter." "I know," he whispered. "Whatever happens, I won't fight it." 2 days later, the town of Havenbrook held its breath. Ray sat in a holding room, chained at the wrists and ankles, the fluorescent lights above buzzing faintly. Across from him sat Marissa Keene, the public defender assigned to his case. Young, ambitious, but already tired in the eyes. She placed a thick file on the table and opened it slowly. "They're charging you with second-degree murder. DA says the presence of the gun indicates intent." Ray stared at the floor. "I didn't go there to kill her." "Doesn't matter," Marissa said. "Not when a woman's dead and the entire state is watching. You were sheriff, a decorated veteran. They'll want to make an example of you." Outside, camera flashes popped like fireworks. News vans had parked outside the courthouse since dawn. Headlines were already spinning. "Former war hero kills wife after transgender reveal. Betrayal or bigotry. Sheriff's tragic fall from grace." Inside the courtroom, the DA built his case around recklessness. This was not a random incident, the prosecutor told the jury. This was a man trained to respond calmly under pressure. And yet, when faced with his wife's truth, he chose violence. Marissa countered with a careful defense. Ray Walker is not a monster. He is a man who loved his wife deeply and was blindsided by something that cracked 30 years of reality in a single moment. What happened that night was not premeditated. It was tragic, but it was not murder. Logan took the stand. His hands trembled, but his voice didn't. "Claire told me 2 days before it happened. She was going to tell him the truth. She was scared, not of Ray, but of what might happen to them both afterward." He paused, eyes locking with Ray's. She didn't want to lose him. Even after 30 years of hiding, she still loved him. "Did you ever feel like Ray would harm her?" Marissa asked. "No," Logan said, then added softly, but I knew he'd be crushed. When Logan stepped down, he passed Ray's chair. Neither man spoke, but for the first time, neither looked away. Raymond Walker, once a decorated war veteran and beloved sheriff, now sat behind bars, awaiting his arraignment. Word spread fast. Some whispered, "She lied to him. What was he supposed to do?" Others murmured, "She didn't deserve to die for it." But most were just stunned. 2 lives, 1 truth, and a single bullet had ended it all. Martin came to visit on the 3rd day. They sat across from each other, the glass partition between them strangely cold. "Jesus, Ray," Martin said, staring at his friend. "What the hell happened?" Ray looked like a ghost, sunken eyes, pale skin, wearing the same expression he did after a particularly brutal firefight overseas. "She told me the truth, and I couldn't handle it," Ray said. "You didn't mean it," Martin said. "You've always had steady hands." "Not that night," Ray whispered. "Not after what I found out." Martin sighed, voice breaking. "Ray, she loved you. Through everything." "I know," Ray said. "And I loved her. That's what hurts the most." There was a long silence. Martin pressed his palm against the glass. "You're still my brother." Ray gave the faintest nod, but inside, he didn't feel like anyone's brother or husband or man. He just felt empty. Ray sat in the holding cell, alone. It was a small gray box, concrete walls, a steel toilet in the corner, and a thin mattress that barely counted as comfort. But none of that mattered. He didn't feel the cold. He didn't notice the flickering overhead light. He just kept replaying the moment. The bang, the gasp, the look in Claire's eyes before she collapsed. Over and over. Time no longer moved. The world beyond the cell might as well not exist. On the 4th day, Detective Lorraine Blake returned. She carried a folder under one arm and a cup of coffee in the other. Ray didn't look up when she entered. "Mr. Walker," she said, setting the coffee in front of him. "Your arraignment's scheduled for Friday. The charge is 2nd-degree manslaughter. Bail will likely be denied, given the nature of the incident." Ray simply nodded. Blake sat down across from him. "You've given us your full statement. There's no doubt you pulled the trigger. The real question the court will ask is why." "I told you," Ray said, his voice gravel. "It was instinct. A sound, a flinch. Years of combat does that to a man. But I never meant to kill her." "I believe you," Blake said. "But you pointed a gun at your wife, Mr. Walker. That speaks to intent, even if you never pulled the trigger on purpose." He rubbed his eyes. "She told me something I couldn't process," he said softly. "She told me the truth, and I didn't know how to be okay with it." Blake tapped her pen against the folder. "Tell me something honestly," she said. "If you could go back to that moment in the living room and do it differently, what would you do?" Ray stared at her. "I'd listen," he said after a pause. I let her finish speaking. I put the gun away. He leaned back, eyes distant. I'd tell her that she didn't have to be afraid anymore. The next day, Ray was allowed to attend Claire's funeral under heavy guard in handcuffs. It was a small service, quiet and tense. People in the town didn't know what to say. Some looked at Ray with pity, others with scorn, but no one dared speak as he approached the casket. Claire's coffin was white. Roses, her favorite, lay across the top. The pastor said a few words about love, truth, and forgiveness. Ray stood still. He couldn't cry anymore. His grief had passed crying and moved into a numb, permanent ache. After the service, everyone left, except one. Logan. He approached Ray cautiously, his face pale and drawn. Ray looked up at him, but said nothing. "I love her too," Logan said quietly. "In a different way, but just as much. She saved my life. You know that." Ray nodded once. "I don't hate you," Logan added. "I want to, but I can't. Because I know that somewhere in all this, you were just trying to survive too." Ray's jaw clenched. "I didn't survive anything," he said. "I destroyed it." That night, back in his cell, Ray pulled out the only thing the jail allowed him to keep. A black and white wedding photo, creased and faded, edges worn. Claire was laughing in the photo, eyes closed, leaning into him. She looked radiant. Free. Real. He traced the edge of her dress with his thumb. She had built a life of truth after years of hiding. And he, the man trained to face anything, had failed to handle the one truth that mattered most. Now, all he had was silence and a lifetime to sit inside it. Friday came, gray and cold. A thin drizzle fell over Havenbrook like the town itself was in mourning. Raymond Walker stood in a dark suit, hands cuffed in front of him, flanked by 2 deputies as he entered the small county courthouse. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as old neighbors, town officials, and reporters from Raleigh gathered. Everyone wanted to see the fall of a hero. He had once stood in this courtroom as a lawman. Now he stood as a defendant. At the defense table, Ray sat beside his court-appointed attorney, a young woman named Marissa Keene. She tried to explain the legal options to him all week, but he barely listened. "What do you want to plead?" she asked again quietly. "Guilty," he said. "Ray, I said guilty." She hesitated. "I can argue for leniency. PTSD, emotional trauma, the fact that it was a tragic accident. It won't bring her back," Ray muttered. "And I don't want to fight. I deserve whatever's coming." The judge entered, an older man Ray had once played poker with. Now he wouldn't meet Ray's eyes. "All rise." The prosecutor gave his opening remarks, calm, firm, clinical. He detailed the events of the shooting, the history, the firearm, the confrontation, the tragic misunderstanding. But his voice sharpened when he spoke of motive. Regardless of emotional distress or personal shock, the prosecutor said, Mr. Walker introduced a deadly weapon into a domestic confrontation. That choice alone created the conditions for what followed. Someone is dead, and the responsibility for that rests with the man who drew the gun. When it was Ray's turn to speak, the courtroom fell silent. He stood slowly, turning toward the judge and the rows of familiar faces. People who once waved to him at the diner, who called him Sheriff Ray. "I didn't come here to defend myself," he said. "I came here to say I was wrong." He took a breath. "For 30 years, I loved a woman who gave me more than I deserved. She made a home out of a broken house, made peace out of a soldier, and loved me through things I never even admitted to myself." He paused. "She kept something from me, something big, and when I found out, I let anger get the best of me. I didn't hurt her because she was transgender. I hurt her because I was weak. I couldn't process it, couldn't control my reaction." He clenched his fists. "But it doesn't matter what I meant. The truth is she's gone, and I pulled the trigger." Ray looked toward the ceiling, blinking away tears. "If there's a punishment worse than losing her, I haven't found it. But if the law needs to give me one, I accept it." The judge recessed for deliberation. When he returned, his voice was grave. "Given the facts, the defendant's remorse, and the nature of the shooting, this court accepts the plea of guilty to second-degree manslaughter." Ray closed his eyes. "I hereby sentence Raymond Walker to 12 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole in 6. There was no gasp, no protest, only a heavy silence. Claire's truth had cost her life. Ray's failure to face it had cost him his freedom. And Havenbrook, once proud of its sheriff and his elegant wife, now whispered only in fragments. After the verdict, Logan approached Ray outside the courtroom as deputies prepared to transport him. "She forgave you," Logan said. Ray looked down. "I didn't deserve it." "No," Logan agreed. "But she gave it anyway." He handed Ray a small envelope, sealed in Claire's handwriting. "She wrote this the night before she left for Denver," Logan said. "She told me to give it to you if anything happened." Ray took the envelope but didn't open it. Not yet. Back in the transport van, chains rattled around Ray's wrists. He looked out the rain-blurred window as Havenbrook disappeared behind him. 12 years. Maybe less with parole. But he knew the real sentence couldn't be measured in years. It was measured in every moment he didn't listen. Every second he let fear speak louder than love. And every night he'd spend remembering the woman who never stopped loving him, even as she died in his arms. Ray's first night in prison was quiet in a way that didn't feel real. No combat zone had ever made him feel this exposed. No patrol, no firefight, nothing compared to the silence that wrapped around him in that narrow cell. A silence that pressed against his chest and made it hard to breathe. He lay on the bunk staring at the ceiling, the paper-thin mattress barely cushioning the pain in his back. But the real weight wasn't physical. It was the envelope still folded in his pocket. Claire's letter. He hadn't opened it since Logan handed it to him. He hadn't dared. Not in court. Not in the van. Not when the metal door slammed shut behind him like the final punctuation of a life that no longer existed. But now, in the stillness, there was no escape. With trembling fingers, Ray sat up, pulled out the envelope, and ran his thumb along the edge. Her handwriting was there, elegant and familiar. Raymond. He opened it slowly. The first line hit like a punch to the gut. If you're reading this, then I didn't come back to you. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep reading. I'm sorry. Not for who I am, but for not telling you sooner. I wanted to, so many times. But I loved what we had too much to risk it. I thought maybe if I just loved you enough, it wouldn't matter. That you'd never have to know. Ray clenched his jaw. The words cut, but not like knives. More like truths that had waited too long to be said. You saved me, Ray. Long before you knew it. When we met, I had already gone through hell. Rejection, surgeries, loneliness. I didn't trust anyone. And then you looked at me like I was home. No one ever did that before. I kept the secret because I didn't want to lose that look. Tears welled in his eyes. I know what you must be feeling. Hurt, betrayed, confused. But please don't let that erase the years we had. Don't rewrite our story because of the page I couldn't bring myself to share. You didn't love a lie, Ray. You loved me. And I loved you. Every day, without fail, without regret. If you're angry, be angry. If you're lost, take time. But don't let my truth destroy you. Let shape you. Let free you. The letter ended simply. You were the love of my life. And I was yours, even if you never knew every chapter. Love always. Claire. Ray folded the letter back slowly, reverently, as if it were made of glass. He sat for a long time with it in his lap. She had never tried to rewrite the truth. She had only tried to survive it. He realized then what he had truly lost. Not just Claire, but the chance to stand beside her truth. To tell her, I see you now, and I still choose you. But he hadn't. And now all he had were memories and a letter written in goodbye. A week later, Ray received a small padded envelope through the prison mail system. No return address. No name. Just his inmate ID handwritten in the corner. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a slim, leather-bound journal and a sticky note. She asked me to hold on to this. I think it's time you read it. Logan. Ray turned the first page. July 11th. I almost told him today. I looked at him across the breakfast table. Same smile, same sleepy eyes, same old coffee cup with the chipped handle. And I thought, just say it. But I couldn't. How do you tell the person who gave you everything that you weren't honest about where you came from? July 24th. The doctor says I'm healthy. That's the funny part. Everything inside is working just fine, except this secret that keeps gnawing at me like it wants to break out and burn down the life I built. August 2nd. Sometimes I wonder if Ray ever suspected. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier if he had. Then I think no. He loved me. Maybe that's all that ever mattered. August 10th. I've decided I'll tell him before I leave for Denver. I can't carry this in a year 31. He deserves my truth. Even if it destroys us. I just hope he sees that my love was always real. That I was always real. Even if my story started differently than he imagined. And if it ends badly, at least I'll go knowing I finally lived honestly. Ray's hand shook as he turned the final page. The ink was smudged, as though Claire had wept while writing. August 14th. This is the last night I'll ever sleep beside him without him knowing all of me. I don't want to be remembered for what I hid. I want to be remembered for how I loved. With everything. With truth. With hope that one day he'll forgive me, not for what I was, but for being afraid to let him in sooner. Ray closed the journal and held it against his chest. The ache inside him deepened, not from anger, but from loss. From knowing she had carried the weight alone for so long. From realizing she had always seen the day coming, even if he hadn't. Over the next weeks, prison moved with mechanical rhythm. Lights on at 6, breakfast by 7, cold cement underfoot, and the clatter of metal bars. But Ray kept himself. He spoke only when necessary. He refused visitors. Until one day, months later, Martin came anyway. They sat across from each other through the bulletproof glass. You look older, Martin said with a half smile. Ray gave a small nod. I feel it. I talked to Logan. Ray looked up cautious. He moved, Martin continued. New name, new state. Said he couldn't stay in a place that reminded him of his sister and the man who couldn't accept her truth. Ray didn't reply. I also talked to Susan, Martin added. She said the community center's renaming the garden after Claire. The Claire Walker Peace Garden. Fitting, don't you think? Ray stared at the table, eyes unreadable. She deserved more than a garden. She deserved someone who understood her, Martin said gently. But she also loved a man who wasn't ready. And she forgave him. That's more than most ever get. That night, back in his cell, Ray took out Claire's letter again. Not to read it, just to hold it. Because sometimes the only thing keeping a man alive is the weight of what he couldn't say in time. 2 years passed. Raymond Walker became inmate #04213A at Midstate Correctional Facility, tucked between rusted farmland and pine woods that stretched endlessly in every direction. He kept his head down, followed the rules, spoke little. The guards called him the sergeant. He still stood straight, still folded his blanket like military regulation, still kept his corner spotless. But inside, the war hadn't ended. Some nights, he'd dream of Claire, in the kitchen, humming to herself, pouring coffee. Her smile would reach her eyes the way it always had. And then, in an instant, the dream would turn to blood, sirens, a firecracker echoing in his skull. He'd wake up gasping, hands still reaching for the gun that wasn't there. It was around the 2nd anniversary of Claire's death when the prison counselor, a quiet man named Dr. Bennett, called Ray in for a session. "You've refused counseling 12 times, Mr. Walker," Bennett said, scribbling something. "What made you show up today?" Ray didn't speak at first. Then, her garden's blooming. Bennett looked up. "Claire." Ray nodded. "Martin sent me a photo. Said the roses finally took root. That means something to you." Ray stared at the floor. She always said flowers grow better when they feel safe, when they're planted in truth. The counselor leaned back in his chair. "Do you feel like you've been living in truth now?" Ray gave a bitter laugh. "I think I'm only just learning what truth really costs." Bennett was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What's the one thing you'd say to her if you had another chance?" Ray closed his eyes. "I'd say, I'm sorry I let fear speak louder than love. And I'd thank her for loving me despite it." Later that night, Ray sat alone in the prison chapel long after lights out. A part of him still wanted punishment. But another part, a part he'd buried deep, wanted redemption. Not from the court, not from God, from himself. He pulled out a worn composition notebook, the one he kept hidden under his mattress, and began to write. It wasn't for publication. It wasn't for show. It was for Claire. "You once said people are like books. We're scared to show others the chapters written in pencil, the ones we wish we could erase. But you let me read you. You handed me every page, even the ones you thought would scare me. And I looked away. I threw the book down before I even tried to understand it. Now all I want is to hold it again. You were always brave, Claire. I wore medals. You wore scars. But you were the real soldier." Ray wrote until his hand cramped, and the tears blurred the ink. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know if 6 years from now he'd walk out free or die inside this place. But tonight, he felt something he hadn't felt since before the gunshot. Connected, not to the world, but to her. A year before his release, Ray received an unexpected letter. Return address, Logan West. Subject, for when you're ready. He stared at it for hours before opening. "Ray, I don't know if this letter will make you feel better or worse, but I need to write it. If not for you, then for her. For a long time, I hated you. I hated you for being the man who made her feel safe, and then the man who took that safety away in a single heartbeat. But time has a way of distorting even the sharpest pain. And grief turns anger into something quieter, something heavier. I think about the Claire I grew up with. I think about the day she came home from her first hormone appointment. She was so scared, Ray. Not scared of herself, scared no one would ever love her after. And then she met you. You gave her the love story she thought she'd never have. And even if you couldn't understand everything, you were her peace for 3 decades. I can't ignore that. She told me once, Ray doesn't see me as broken. He sees me as complete. Maybe that was her wish more than her truth, but meant everything to her. You meant everything to her. I don't know if I forgive you. Maybe not yet. But I believe you loved her. And I believe she knew that too, even at the end. Take care of yourself. Logan. Ray folded the letter with steady hands. He didn't cry this time. Instead, he stared out the narrow prison window at the winter sky and whispered, "Thank you, Logan. Not for forgiveness, but for the beginning of something better than silence." 6 years later, the gates opened. Raymond Walker stepped out, thinner than before, hair grayer, eyes deeper. He wore a plain shirt, loose jeans, and an old army jacket, the one Claire once patched after a winter storm tore the sleeve. The sun felt too bright, the world too fast, but the air tasted like something close to freedom. Martin stood by the pickup truck at the edge of the parking lot, arms crossed, eyes scanning him. "You look like hell," Martin said as Ray approached. "I feel worse," Ray replied, managing a half smile. They drove in silence for a while, the North Carolina pines blurring past the window. Familiar roads, familiar sky, but Ray knew nothing would ever be the same. Martin didn't take him home, not yet. He drove to the garden. The Claire Walker Peace Garden sat behind the Havenbrook Community Center. It was small, but it breathed life. Roses, sunflowers, lilies, all in full bloom. A bronze plaque sat at the entrance, inscribed with Claire's name and one line beneath it. "To live in truth is to bloom in peace." Ray stood still, staring at it for a long time. "She'd have hated the plaque," he said finally. Martin laughed. "Probably. Too dramatic, she'd say." Ray stepped through the archway and walked the path she had designed, now grown wild with color. He sat on a bench beneath a willow tree and pulled the worn envelope from his coat. Claire's letter. The same one. He read it again, slowly, like prayer, and then he lit a match. The flame caught, curling the paper, burning the words into smoke. He watched it rise, felt it drift upward like something sacred. "I forgive you," he whispered. "But more than that, I remember you." He closed his eyes, felt the sun on his face, the wind through the trees. That night, Ray returned to the house on Sycamore Lane. It had been cleaned, kept intact by friends who couldn't bear to see it fall. But Claire's touch was still everywhere. The hand-painted kitchen tiles, the hummingbird feeders out back, the bookshelves arranged by color. He walked room to room, absorbing the quiet. In the bedroom, the bed was made, the side where Claire used to sleep untouched since that day. He sat on the edge, hands on his knees. "I'm home," he said aloud. The silence welcomed him. In the months that followed, Ray didn't try to erase what happened. He spoke at local groups about grief and regret. He worked part-time at a nearby veteran center. He tended the garden every Friday, planting new blooms every season. Some people still looked at him sideways. Some never spoke to him again. But most eventually nodded when they passed. Not in approval, but in acknowledgement. He had been broken. He had hurt, but he had not disappeared. One afternoon, a young couple visited the garden. They stopped near the plaque and lingered there. Ray watched from a bench nearby. The woman, maybe in her late 20s, read the inscription aloud. "To live in truth is to bloom in peace." "That's beautiful." Her partner nodded. "Do you know who Claire Walker was?" Ray stood slowly and walked over. "I did," he said gently. "She was someone worth knowing." They looked at him. "Were you related?" the woman asked. Ray smiled, faint but warm. "No," he said. "I was lucky enough to love her." That night, back on the porch of his house, Ray watched the stars settle over Havenbrook. A cup of coffee in one hand, the other resting on the old armrest Claire used to scratch her initials into. He didn't believe in erasing the past anymore. He believed in carrying it, gently, honestly. He believed in second chances, not to fix what was lost, but to honor it. He looked up at the sky and whispered one last time, "I see you now, Claire." And for the first time in years, the silence that followed felt like peace. Spring returned to Havenbrook the following year. The Claire Walker Peace Garden had become more than just a memorial. It had become a sanctuary, a place where people came to grieve, to heal, and sometimes to speak truths they'd never dared say aloud. One warm afternoon, Ray sat trimming the rose bushes when a teenage girl hesitantly approached. Her hands were fidgeting with the sleeves of her denim jacket, and her eyes darted around nervously. "You're the guy who planted all this?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Ray looked up and nodded. I helped keep it alive. Claire planted the first seeds. The girl hesitated. Was she really like me? Ray stood, brushing dirt from his hands. You mean, was she transgender? She nodded. She was, Ray said softly. And she was the bravest soul I ever knew. The girl looked down, voice cracking. My parents, they don't really see me anymore. I don't know where I'm supposed to fit. Ray reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden pendant, hand-carved in the shape of a hummingbird. He placed it in her palm. Claire used to say the hummingbird is proof that delicate things can survive storms. The girl smiled faintly through tears. Thank you. Ray didn't ask her name. He simply watched as she walked to the bench under the willow tree, the same one Claire once loved, and sat there in silence, holding the pendant close to her chest. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Ray walked the garden paths one last time before locking the gate. He glanced back at the bench. It was empty now, but something about the air felt different. Lighter. Alive. Claire wasn't just a memory anymore. She had become a seed, planted in others, blooming in silence, growing through truth.